This episode is sponsored by Well Balanced Nutrition and 360 Health.
Welcome to the Health Geeks Book Club podcast. Listen in as Kristen Norton and Eleanor Russell review all those great health and wellness books you've been wanting to read or you have read and want to talk about. Here's Kristen and Eleanor.
Hey, Kristen. I found a really good book, or you found a really good book, or we found a really good book that we've read and enjoyed, and it's called Into the Forest, and we'll be talking about that today on our the Health Geeks Book Club podcast.
I can't wait. So it's how trees can help you find health and happiness. Oh, and let me tell you, if you look at this book, you get your hands on it, it is a beauty. It's a perfect coffee table book. Lots of wonderful, wonderful pictures.
Definitely not like the other books we've been reviewing.
Right.
I mean, it was a gift when you opened it up. Oh,
that's right.
You just go, ah.
It was a nice, light read with very beautiful pictures.
Yeah, so it came out in 2018, and it's from the Penguin Random House. So that's in New York, publishing house with a bunch of editors and copywriters. And so this book is, I have the hardback, and I'm so glad I do. It's a keeper.
Yeah, I have the softback, but it's also pretty good quality.
Mm-hmm, yeah. It's called The Japanese Art and Science of Shinrin-yoku, Forest Bathing.
Yeah, and we thought we had different books at first because the softback and the hardback book have a little bit different
title
look to it and title even.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But
so who is the author here?
Dr. Qing Li, if I'm saying that right, and he's an associate professor at the Nippon Medical School in Tokyo. Mm-hmm. He's one of the world's leading experts on forest bathing. He's the vice president and the secretary general of the International Society of Nature and Forest Medicine. Mm-hmm. And he's the president of the Society of Forest Medicine in Japan. And then lastly, he's one of the directors of the Forest Therapy Society in Japan. So it seems like he is completely dedicated his life to this idea for forest bathing.
I know, and the thing that we were talking about, coffee table book, the reason I think you said that is these color plates. It's like almost every other page has got a gorgeous picture that you just want to sit and look at.
Of nature,
yeah.
Yes.
And the type font, people get into what font do you use on your print. Well, it's a very readable font, and the size of it in this book was quite large. Was it big in yours or not?
Yeah, it's large, and I really like that there's so much white space.
Yes,
I'm like,
a lot of white space.
Well, they really thought about that because I guess in nature you've got that white space too, and this is not overwhelming when you look at it. It's very soothing.
Yeah. So can I kick us off with, since it's the practice of Shinrin-yoku?
What is Shinrin-yoku?
Well, they gave us a discussion here, so I just thought this was beautiful. So let me share it with you.
Please do.
The forest is like our mother, a sacred place, a gift to us humans from the divine. It is a paradise of healing. Mother Nature fills us with wonder and curiosity and invites us in. She works in harmony with us and with our innate capacity for healing. This is the foundation of forest medicine. In the forest, we begin to reconnect with nature and journey towards health and happiness. The art of forest bathing is the art of connecting with nature through our senses. All we have to do is accept the invitation. Mother Nature does the rest.
I love that.
I know, that's all I need to say. It's beautiful.
That's right.
And I am a forest girl. I live in the trees. My home has lots of trees and green. And there was a time I thought I wanted to live at the ocean, and I tried that, and there was no green. So I found myself pulled back into the forest land. And I wonder, in Japan, there's some beautiful maps in this book, too. Did you notice the green places that he's identified? Some forest therapy bases in his country and then around the world. But there's not every place that has greenery like we have here in North Carolina.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I think it's very similar to some of because the pictures in this book reminded me of where we live. Mm-hmm.
Well, you say that you were a forest girl from the beginning. Well, anybody who knows me growing up, you wouldn't find me in nature. I hate bugs.
Yeah.
And so the people in my life, I feel blessed because they have gotten me out of that shell and allowed me to experience nature. And while it's not like supernatural for me to want to go, I love going camping and being outdoors. I just have to have someone go with me to be my guide. But my husband is that for me, and my business partner Lucy, she loves being outdoors. So I have grown to love nature, even though it wasn't natural to me growing up, but minus the bugs. I still don't like the bugs.
Well, I think when I was little, I loved bugs. I was kind of weird, and in my neighborhood, the mothers would call me to come over to get the big spider behind the washing machine, and they say, "Eleanor, come over." I was maybe 8, 9, but I thought they were just fascinating. So. But I also generationally, between you and me, my generation growing up in the 50s as little children, we were still pretty much allowed to run out of the house and just go in the woods and be gone all day. Children today, there's a sense of fear for them that they'll be in danger if they're allowed to roam. So I think you may have grown up in a culture where it was in transition to maybe a city with more safety precautions than you might have in a country or rural setting.
Yeah, well, luckily I still, remember climbing trees and riding bikes and being gone all day long and then having to come in when the street lights came on.
Yes.
And then it was then that we would try to play video games instead of now. We play video games first. But yeah, and I think it depends on where you live. We live on a street that I feel very safe in, so I allow my kids to just go and climb trees and play outside.
So that idea of safety, yeah.
Yeah, so that's important. But yeah, it can be generational.
Yeah, I think about some of the stuff we did with pocket knives. Oh, we would carry pocket knives and we'd carve, things in trees. And now I'm going, why did I do that? I injured this tree. But, and cut fingers and, have to run home with, blood running down our elbows and stuff. And our moms would just put Band-Aids on and say, go back, interesting time. Well, there's another thing in here. Trees can make you feel richer and younger. I think that's a nice thing to strive for. It would be nice to feel that way.
Yeah, so he really goes into how we can experience nature with all of our senses, and
writes a book on that, doesn't he? He talks about vision, and he talks about smelling, and he talks about touching.
Exactly.
Yeah, and he develops those ideas about what can happen to you in the woods,
right,
or in the forest.
And because he, as we all were saying, that we've had such great experiences either growing up or now with nature, he was wondering, why do I feel so good when I'm in nature? Mm-hmm. And so that's
taking it
kind
from
of the
a
motivation.
Feeling to science. He was trying to transition it from just a feeling to explaining scientifically why.
Yeah. So let's start with the natural silence is what he calls it. And basically, it's not silence because you hear nature sounds, but it's no man-made noise. And he says studies show nature sounds make us feel relaxed. Well, I don't feel like we need a study for that, but studies back it up. And the interesting thing is birds sing on the same frequency level that we are most sensitive to. So maybe that's why we love the sound of birds so much, and it can be calming to us. I thought that was neat, and that natural silence can really soothe our fragile heads and lift mental fatigue, because when we go throughout our day, we're constantly filtering out this input that is not natural to us, versus when we're in the woods, the input is more natural and our brain just kind of rests and listens rather than has to process, what is that bird saying? Or what is, I don't know, XYZ. So.
Yeah, he says natural silence has been called one of the most endangered resources on the planet. And when we look at pollution, types of pollution, light pollution, trash, water pollution, air pollution, noise pollution is substantial. And people that are living near airports report, substantial irritability and emotional disturbances. So finding ways to still our mind, I think, is part of the mindfulness movement as well.
Yeah.
Is being still. and quiet.
Yeah.
It's good for us. It's a healthy thing.
You know, my husband is an avid golfer, and I think it's in a way, it's forest bathing.
I think so too.
Because the course is full of the birds chirping. It's very peaceful. You're out in nature the whole time.
Yeah, for 3 hours. You know, if you're playing 18 holes, and it makes you stay rather than just go quick. Golf is a sport that takes time.
It does, yeah.
And usually you're doing it in a social context. Again, I think that's good. But I don't know that this author says we need to take a lot of people in the woods with us, does he? I'm
Tell me
reflecting.
more.
Well, I'm just kind of remembering. As I was reading the book, I was visioning all of his recommendations to me as a solitary, in the woods. I don't remember him saying take a group and hold hands and ring around the tree. Yeah.
No, yeah.
You know, it was more of a solitary experience.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about hearing, the sight. So he says blues and greens of color of the naturescapes are also restful, versus the grays of an urban scene have been proven to make us unhappy and even aggressive.
And you know, the popular color is gray on your interior walls.
Oh,
and I have rebelled against that because I just think it is a dead color. I'm not a fan of it, but it is everywhere I go. There's gray.
Oh, that's interesting. I really like gray on the walls. I haven't thought about
it's
it
very
like
stunning.
that.
It is stunning, but I feel it, and I much prefer the greens and blues.
Yeah, greens and blues.
Although I don't have them in my. Yes, I do. I have a green bedroom now, not blue.
Green and blue are my favorite colors. But he does say that you can bring nature indoors.
And he recommends that, doesn't he?
Yeah, he recommends plants. And I feel like the gray is a nice backdrop for all of those color pops. But yeah, that's just interesting. So
I will say my adult son has discovered houseplants. He lives in an urban area in an apartment, and loves his windowsills. And I noticed in the studio we've got plants on the windowsill, so this is good.
Yeah, people with plants in their offices are more energized, they feel less stressed, and are better able to concentrate. So that's another fact in this book.
What about smell?
Smell.
The smell of the outdoors inside.
Yeah.
You can bring the forest into your home with essential oils.
Yeah, he does have a section about essential oils. He talks about tea tree oil, Douglas fir, and spruce. And says you can diffuse these, or I learned about Japanese candles for the first time.
Yeah,
I didn't
me too.
realize those were different than the ones in America. Apparently in Japan, they make them from a wax of the sumac tree. Is that right?
I think so, yes.
And then the wick is rush grass. So now I want to get my hands on a Japanese candle.
And I have seen them available. I think Proximity Hotel may have some.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Anyway.
So, do you diffuse essential oils sometimes?
No, I don't.
Okay. I have sometimes. It's not a habit I've gotten into, but I do like lavender. And
I remember back in the 70s, there was a lot of incense.
I burn incense.
Yeah. And I still have an incense holder, but I don't have any incense sticks. I don't know. I prefer walking out in the woods and getting the endorphins from the trees.
I do too. And he uses a lot of Japanese terms. And apparently there's a term for the smell of the forest after it rains. Oh.
That's rock smell.
Petrichor is the smell after rain.
Yeah. So, the smell of nature is one of the ways to take in through all your senses. What about touch?
Oh, I was going to go to sight again. That
okay.
idea of, have you ever taken the time to stretch out on the grass and do your earthing? But when you look up and if you're near trees, you see the branching patterns of the trees.
Oh, you're talking about fractals.
Yes. Isn't that interesting? That they give us some sense of awe and we pause, and it's very comforting.
That's right. He says that the fractals are the repeating patterns we see in nature, and it can remind us of the bigger picture, that we're part of.
And it can reduce our stress by as much as 60%.
That's
now,
huge.
When he says something like that, I say, okay, where's the bibliography? I want to know about that. So I looked.
He doesn't have
not what
an extensive one.
Well, the bibliography in this book is not the traditional bibliography. He just has a list of, I mean, you can track it down, because like if I wanted to look that up, you go back and he just has the chapter title, the page number, and then he's tells you what he was talking about and gives you the reference. It's not in the standard format, though, that we're accustomed to in scientific literature. Yeah. And then he's got websites and other books that you can read. And he didn't include one of my favorite books called The Hidden Life of Trees, which I just adored that book. It's similar.
I remember hearing about that one.
Okay, so that's sight, that's smell.
Okay, what about touch? He talks a little bit about hot springs. Mm-hmm. Which we're not lucky enough to have.
Oh, but I grew up in West Virginia, and we had White Sulphur Springs and Hot Springs, Virginia.
Okay.
So there are some areas not too far from us if people want to go experience that. And that came, those areas got developed because there was a period in the history of American medicine or allopathic medicine where hygiene was discovered, and that if people cleaned themselves, they reduce their infections and health stuff. And so, we've incorporated hygiene in our practices of health. And so they had these hotels where people could come to these baths and bathe and, experience the minerals from the earth. And really interesting. Smell the outdoors.
And he also talks about in the section grounding yourself. So you just mentioned, have you ever laid on the ground and grounding? So what is grounding? Well, it's, going barefoot is connecting with your sense of touch to the earth. So he suggests that you take your shoes off and socks off and be in nature for 20 minutes. And I thought it was really interesting how he described this. So he says, think of the earth like a giant battery with a natural low-level charge, and that we're connecting with that electric charge and kind of recharging.
Yep. I totally buy into that, because a few years ago, I met a woman who said, have you ever heard of earthing? I said, nope. And she said, read the book. And I did. And I do it all the time. Because when you do think about it, we put rubber soles on our feet and we separate ourselves from the earth. And evolutionarily, we walked around barefooted, right? Mm-hmm. And the idea of that battery is that there's an electron repository in the earth. And when you think about lightning, a lot of times that's what's happening. You're getting a charge from the sky to the earth, making an electrical circuit, right? So the theory is that if you bring those electrons into your body through the soles of your feet, or if you lie out flat, then you can absorb even more of them, and then they're available to those free radicals so that they don't have to grab an electron off of a stationary molecule or a structural molecule and disrupt the cell in its activity, the biological cell. So I totally think that's cool to think about. And, what's it going to hurt to go barefoot?
Yeah. I've heard some people say never go barefoot. But I've also, I think a therapist recommended grounding to me before. So,
well, never going barefoot may have come from the farms when you would walk around and step in a cow pie, and then you'd get a parasite, drill into your skin. So you have to be careful where you step.
That's right. And the book says, watch out for glass.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I've actually gone outside barefoot a couple times since reading this book. So.
Well, I did it one time. I was having a fever, and my family was there, and I nothing was helping me, and so I sort of halfway stripped down, went out in the yard and laid out on the ground, and my family said, okay, she's lost it, and they, what are you doing? I said, I'm earthing, and they said, okay. And I have to tell you, yes, it did. I recovered by the next day. I mean, that evening I felt better. I might have broken anyway, who knows, but nothing was helping me, and it was the earth held me and cured me. Yeah, so I believe that's my story.
What you needed in that moment.
Yeah. And I'm a crazy lady. Okay. So what about green exercise?
Well, you were talking about ions. Can we talk about negative ions?
Yeah.
I love this concept. It's a neat one. So charged particles in the air that are energizing and refreshing. So negative ions, do you have a better explanation than that? Than what I just gave? Okay. So the air near a waterfall can contain as many as 100,000 negative ions per cubic centimeter, versus the air in our office or in our homes can maybe be 100 per cubic centimeter. So if you've ever like felt so refreshed and energized by being by a stream or a waterfall, it's because of the negative ions. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So he doesn't say a ton about negative ions, but I think it's just a neat thing to know about. One of the reasons why we feel so refreshed in nature.
Yeah. Did he mention the endorphins much? I don't remember him talking about that, because that the trees are secreting endorphin-like substances, so that when we're breathing in the forest as well, and that's not the negative electron, it's more of the endorphin structure, neurotransmitter.
When he talks about phytoncides, is that what you're talking about?
Maybe that might be what he's calling it.
Off?
Yeah, right. I think so. I would agree that that's probably the terminology that would equate with what I'm saying. Yeah. So the idea that what you inhale in the outdoors can be very beneficial as long as you're in a clean environment.
True. Yeah. All right. So sorry about that. Go on to green exercise.
Yeah, exercising outside. Going in a dark basement and watching a TV screen while you exercise may not be the best results or the optimum results.
Well, and I think people can feel that too. I've heard people tell me, I can't exercise on a treadmill, but I'll run anywhere outside. And this book just points out that you get more energy. You get re-energized from a workout outside. That you don't get from just running on a treadmill or something like that.
Right. Well, I really like this book. I'm glad I read it. It makes me feel good about things.
Me too. It inspires me.
It's simple.
It did the job I think it set out to do, and just inspired me to reconnect with nature, to stop and notice and appreciate how I feel when I'm in nature. I'm even just like listening to the birds chirping even more so now, and connecting with that. So,
and doesn't he have some therapeutic, like they have camps where people can go and there's a guide that will help you learn how to forest bathe? It seems like they were moving towards establishing some sort of therapeutic modality for people in need.
Yeah, he does this, and he teaches his students and takes them out forest bathing. And in the back of the book, he has this PALMS test, profile of mood states. And he has his students fill out this survey about how they feel before they forest bathe and after. And their anxiety is always lower. Their fatigue is sometimes lower. And it's just a technical way to measure how you're feeling.
Yeah, and I kind of laughed there a little bit. I was chuckling because I got tickled when he talked about the science work that he's doing. He said, I got 12 businessmen to go with me for 3 days. And, I'm sure he gave them that inventory before and after, these 12 businessmen. And I'm thinking, is that a write-off on their corporate? Yeah, I don't know. I was suspicious of but I believe everything this guy said because I want to believe it, and I have experienced it. So I think I would look at his research again as well to see how many people. But I think historically, anything like this there's evidence over thousands of years, whether or not there's a research paper in a journal that documents and verifies it.
Yeah, it's definitely, the Eastern medicine that goes back.
Right.
And we just can feel how, and he even says that forest bathing is more of a preventative thing, and not like, oh, I have diabetes, I'm going to go stand in the forest and cure myself. But, the more we can get, he says our health and the health of our forests go hand in hand. Yes,
and I would also say, since you said preventative, that takes us to children. And he does talk about, and I think he even referenced the last Child in the Woods work that was done not too long ago by another author. But children, if they can be outside and connect with nature in their early years, it serves them so well through their adult journey. And have a lot of children, like you don't like bugs, but we have children now who are afraid to go on a hike. You know, they said, I don't know what. I had a student who'd grown up in Brooklyn, and we tried to take her into the woods down in High Point at the Environmental Science Center, and she balked at the very front of the trail. She said, I'm not going in there. I'm afraid of that, you know.
Oh, wow.
And she was in tears, and it was you know, a moment for me to say, here is a 19-year-old, 20-year-old who has never been in the woods and doesn't know what it is. So, of course, it's frightening and different. So there are more than that one example, I bet you.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So the more that we can get our kids and have parks in our cities and have access to wilderness and protect our wilderness areas so that it is available to us, I think that's another thing this author was talking about. The forest, you said the health of the forest and the health of us go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And if we keep cutting them down and neglecting them, it'll hurt us.
And he says the more we expose our children, the more they're going to appreciate it and want to protect it in the future.
Yeah. And
a tie into our previous podcast, we know that spending time in nature can also be good for our gut health, too.
Oh, yes, it can. Put your hands in the soil. Let those microbes arrive. All right. Well, Kristen, this has been fun. I'm Eleanor Russell from 360 Health. I help people make healthy happen. Do that with education, do that with products, I do that with community, and I do that with opportunities for people. So you can connect with me at 360healthforyou.com.
And I am Kristen from Well Balanced Nutrition, where we support you on your wellness journey. I invite you to join us in our Insiders group, where we share meal ideas, tricks, and habits that will allow you to enjoy the journey.
See you next time.
See you next time.
And opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and are not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted, and no part can be reproduced without the expressed written consent of Kristen and Eleanor.